been improving the health of the Four Corners since 1910. As a nonprofit hospital, San Juan Regional Medical Center is a values-driven organization. We strive to deliver on our mission to personalize health care and create vitality and enthusiasm in healing. We are here for you when you need us, offering a comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and emergency care services. Ten minutes past 8 o'clock. It is Thursday morning, February the 7th. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Michlin, and thank you for tuning in to KSJE 90.9 FM, the information and cultural beacon of the Four Corners. It's great to have everyone along with us this morning, and welcome aboard those of you who are watching us live from our visual radio studio, from the KSJE Facebook page and YouTube channel. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. Coming up in just a moment, I'll be talking with local archaeologist Paul Reed on the program for our regular visit, but we want to pass along a couple of items for you, including some of the things going on because of the weather in the area this morning. We do have some 2-hour delays that we're aware of. Farmington schools on a 2-hour delay today. San Juan College also on a 2-hour delay. That means classes here at San Juan College will not start until 10 a.m. This morning here. There are some icy spots on the roads, but things are starting to clear up just a little bit as the sun comes out and the road crews get out. So do be careful if you're on the roads this morning. You can also go to our website at KSJE.com. That's where we have a lot of the information about any other school closings or delays that are coming in. But right now, just these two that we're aware of in the area. That leads me to talk about the forecast. We are going to have a sunny day today with a high of 33 degrees. It's still going to be kind of chilly, but the sun will help melt off some of that snow on the pavement at least. Very clear and cold overnight tonight with a low of 11 degrees. Warmer tomorrow on Friday with a high of 43 and nearing 50 again by the weekend on Saturday and Sunday. Overnight lows in the mid-20s. And again, to remind you, of course, coming up in just a moment, Paul Reed will be here at just right now, in just a few moments, talking about some important topics in the region. At 9 a.m., Mick Hess will be here roving with the arts. He is playing more Bach cantatas for us at 9 on Roving with the Arts and sharing some arts news, so all the more reason to stay tuned to KSJE throughout the day today. We're glad that you were with us. With that being said, let me welcome into the program my guest who is speaking to us via Skype this morning from his home near Taos. Paul Reed is here once again. Paul, good morning.
Good morning, Scott.
Good to see you and have you with us this morning. And you look a little look warm, I hope, but it looks like it's a chilly morning where you are.
It is indeed. I think we hit about 1 above or maybe 0 here last night.
Wow. Now, you're not too far up in the mountains, are you? I didn't think that you were that far.
Yeah, our place is at about 8,000 feet.
Oh, so, well, that'll do it, won't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but, you know, we have a beautiful south-facing view, so not really much to complain about.
I guess not. That's very true. It's a beautiful spot. I have seen pictures, but it's good to have you with us this morning. And the topic that we want to talk about this morning, and we invite other folks to join the conversation. You can do that by writing a comment on the Facebook video that we are broadcasting live this morning, but we hope folks will chime in. But the issue is this area around Chaco Canyon. You and I have talked about this for a number of years, it seems, that is going to be put up maybe for some lease sales for some potential oil and gas development in the next month, I think. And so kind of bring us up to speed on what's going on here, Paul. Did I get that mostly right?
Yeah, we have another lease sale that comes up. They pushed the date a little, but it looks like it'll be in late March, probably either the 19th or the week after on the 26th. And just to speak a little to that, as part of what the enabling legislation for BLM and how BLM works in the West and in New Mexico, they're required to offer oil and gas leases every quarter. So we generally do March, June, September, and December. That's part of their normal operating procedure. And what that's kind of bumping up against right now, of course, is this process that we've talked about a couple of times on the show, which is the Farmington office of BLM modifying their long-range resource management plan. So this is described as an amendment to that plan. And that process has been ongoing since late 2013. So we're going into the 7th year of that. And it's certainly a very complicated process, as we've talked on the show. The concern that folks have, though, is that BLM now operates under a 2003 plan that didn't anticipate the development that we're seeing now in the area around Counselor and Liebrook, primarily, with hydraulic fracturing and drilling down to 5,000 feet, doing horizontal development drilling to get to resources. So that was a totally unanticipated development in the 03 plan. BLM realized that, by 2011, 2012, started this process to amend their plan, but we still don't have a plan that's been agreed upon and vetted for comment and all that, but these lease sales go on quarterly. So,
gotcha.
That's a concern to a lot of people, because basically the oil and gas companies at this point are following the old rules, and we all realize, and I think the oil companies do, that we need new rules to account for this. So that's kind of the one hand. On the one hand, what we're talking about. The other issue is that some of these leases that are going to come up next month are within a zone of protection and exclusion that BLM had agreed to put in place, and this was through work that we did with our partners at Wilderness Society, National Parks and Conservation, National Trust for Historic Preservation, and a lot of other groups who had asked BLM to basically not lease in this area 10 miles around Chaco until this resource management plan amendment is released and until people can see what sort of protections we might put in place. So that's, it's a complicated story, but that's kind of the 2-cent version.
Okay, all right. Well, and I know we have talked about this before, and talked about this buffer zone, if you will, of the 10-mile, and that seemed to have been respected up until now, or maybe I'm just not remembering correctly. Paul, help me to refresh my memory, but wasn't everybody kind of using that and abiding by that up until this point? This is what's different about this particular sale, I believe, is it not?
Right, indeed, and here's the somewhat frustrating part, from our perspective, and I think from the perspective of the Native American tribes and a lot of other folks, is we now have leases that are announced that are within this 10-mile zone that BLM said they would not lease within. This has happened before, and what we typically see are some documents that suggest that they might offer leases within the 10-mile zone. When those actually go up for auction, then they pull the ones that are in the 10-mile zone. So we're a little uncertain, to be honest, if that's going to happen again. But then, we're kind of on this side of the fence thinking about this and saying this isn't maybe the best management strategy. If we're going to honor this 10-mile protection zone around Chaco, until this plan gets worked out and people have appropriate chances for comment, until BLM finishes the Native American consultation that's required under the law, why don't we just not do this? But the problem is we've seen this pattern every single year. Is leases are offered in the 10-mile zone, and then at the last minute those get pulled out and they move forward with leasing parcels that are not in the area that are of greatest concern, at least for the archaeology and the cultural sites. I see. So it doesn't seem like a very efficient process, is what I'm saying, in the long run. Of course, the backdrop to all of this is we need the agencies, BLM, and of course BIA joined as a partner. The Bureau of Indian Affairs doesn't issue land management plans the same way BLM does, and Forest Service, and the national parks have general management plans. We have all these different plans that are pretty much the same thing. They lay out a vision of 15 to 20 years for how a particular piece of land in the country, federal land, is going to be managed. BIA does not have to issue those because they're working with Native American Indian trust lands. But BIA joined the process with BLM a couple of years ago, which we were very heartened by, because this is a complicated, checkerboarded landscape, as our listeners well know. But here we are again, 6 years, 7 years into the process, and we still don't know exactly what direction the agencies want to which direction they want to head. But the lease sales keep coming up every quarter, and then people get interested in those. Certainly the oil companies are pursuing their interests, and then we look at it from the conservation, preservation side and say, are we threatening, irreplaceable cultural resources in our state? So, it's a juggling act for sure. We would just prefer that, BLM and BIA finish this plan, and that they perhaps don't lease anywhere near the areas that are of concern to Native American groups, to conservationists, to archaeologists, other folks, until that plan gets finished.
Right. And it seems to me that I remember maybe some of this moving forward during the partial government shutdown that was happening for about 35 days back in December and January. But even though a lot of the BLM maybe was shut down, that portions of this were moving forward during that time. Am I remembering that correctly?
Right, and that had raised a lot of concerns on the part of people because, oil and gas leasing was deemed to be an essential service during the shutdown, but BLM had told their staff to stay away. So they had, a really bare staff on the job trying to deal with, these continuing oil and gas lease sales, which were not suspended in any way, shape, or form. So that was a real problem from the perspective of trying to keep track of these and being able to contact anyone at BLM and say, hey, what's the status of the March sale? We have another sale coming up in June that also may have some concerns for approaching the boundaries of the site that is out to the southeast of Chaco called Pueblo Pintado. And we're trying to see what that's going to look like. So yeah, we need our government officials and employees on the job, and I'm very grateful for my part of it that the shutdown's done, and I hope we don't have another one in a week.
That's right. That is a possibility, isn't it?
It is a possibility, and this doesn't serve our country well in any shape or form. But if we're going to shut down the government, a lot of us feel like the oil and gas leasing should stop as well.
Right.
Because we're not in a crisis here. There's plenty of oil. The supply of oil on the world market is very high right now. We're enjoying low gas prices at the pump. Taos a lot of times is close to $3 a gallon, depending upon the way that fluctuates. Right now we're at $2.15, which is the lowest prices in this neck of the woods in probably 5 years.
Sure.
So clearly we're not in a crisis. So there's a lot of intersecting things coming together for us.
But I know, Paul, there's a lot of our oil and gas folks in this area and across the state, of course, who would say, they're not making drilling plans or resource plans for right now. They're looking, 2, 3, 5 years down the road, I would suppose. So that's probably what they would say. I do want to point out to our listeners and our viewers, I did invite officials from the BLM in New Mexico to join us on the program today, and they declined. That they had some other things going on. I know there were some other things going on in southeast New Mexico that they couldn't have someone for us, but we're hoping to do that on a future program, everybody, so we do want to get that other point of view across and hear what they have to say as well, in addition to the concerns that Paul...
for the Farmington field office or the office manager or the district manager to come on and discuss this, because it really is unclear. I think with the history that we've gone through, I know that we've at Archaeology Southwest have been, involved in this since 2013. So, and the lease sales come up quarterly. So there really shouldn't be any doubt on the part of anybody that if parcels get proposed that are within the zone that we feel is getting too close to Chaco Canyon, that people are going to protest, and
right.
Word is going to get out. Folks out on the ground may show up in force to protest, and say, we don't want this to go forward, we need to protect our communities. There's no reason anyone should be unaware of how important this issue is to folks, at the local level in Counselor and Liebrook, at our state level, and really across the West. So it is a bit puzzling. I hope we can get a BLM official on to just kind of explore the issues, because, this is not, from my side, about finger pointing or anything else. It's just trying to understand what the overall plan is here. And by plan here, I'm talking about the vision. And
right.
This is something that we've tried to work on for 5 years. And this is why, the now sort of defunct notion of a master leasing plan for this area, this is a specific way of looking at development that BLM has now moved away from and is not using. But the thrust of that approach was to say, hey, well, what does the next 5 to 10 to 15 years look like? And can we talk to oil companies and see where they might want to develop? And, they have new leases they might bid on. They have existing leases. Let's talk about some plans so that people don't feel like, oh, they're offering leases again, or they're going out to drill tomorrow, and should we be worried about it? People get concerned because information isn't shared, and we haven't really gone through this process of public vetting for some of this. And, we're all still driving cars. There's no question that we're very much dependent on an oil and gas economy nationwide, and particularly in our state. I think we're maybe starting to see a vision of a different future and a cleaner, greener future. But we have to work together to try and make that transition. And I think that we may have reached a tipping point here where people really want to start explicitly planning our energy future. And really, to be honest, and this is something that the BLM could respond to, this is not something that's happened. I think we've pretty much have let the oil companies dictate the flow of how this business proceeds, and maybe we're at a point where we pull in the more public comment and just consider this process a little differently.
Right. Paul Reed is my guest this morning. He works with Salmon Ruins and Archaeology Southwest. We were talking about the proposal from the BLM that is planning to put some parcels up for oil and gas development within the 10-mile buffer zone around Chaco Canyon, and that certainly has gotten the attention of Paul and some of his colleagues and some others. Tribal members, too, I would think, Paul. We've talked before about how you've been working and reaching out to some of the pueblos and tribes in that area, including the Navajo Nation and others, of course, that certainly would have some connections to that site and the sites around Chaco Canyon. And I can imagine that they can't be too pleased about this potential development happening so close to some of their sacred sites.
Right, exactly. I mean, we've got the Navajo Nation as a major landholder and stakeholder in the area. We've got the local counselors at Chapter, Ojo, and Sino, and others. And then we have Pueblo people who aren't currently living on these lands anymore, but have deep ancestral ties. And I think that's one thing that we've been helping to focus on with the Pueblo of Acoma and the study that we've begun and have almost completed, working with the All Pueblo Council of Governors, who meet every month, and that's the 19 New Mexico Pueblos, plus Isleta del Sur down in Texas. And basically, they're trying to deal with issues at a larger level, but protecting the sacred sites in Chaco and the archaeology and all the cultural sites is a big part of the concern they have. And I think the tribes would really appreciate just having more frequent contact with federal agencies and going through this process of consultation. We have a couple of different federal laws that come into play: the National Historic Preservation Act, which underlies our historic preservation and archaeology work in the country, and then the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, which really dictates how agencies should manage landscapes and think about the impacts to the greater environment. Both of these laws require frequent consultation and meaningful consultation with Native American nations. And I think at this point, with what I've heard from different groups, they feel like BLM should really be doing more of this type of outreach and discussing things. So what we've been trying to do while we have this process of the Resource Management Plan Amendment, and I'm going to put my arms up here and wave, that's kind of our big banner. So that's right. The overall plan. We have leasing quarterly that's in the mid-range, and then we have sort of down closer to the ground. Companies will buy a lease, successfully purchase it, then they'll actually go out and stake oil or gas wells and run pipelines and access roads. And that's where a lot of the environmental work gets done. But what doesn't happen at sort of that on-the-ground staking permitting level is meaningful consultation with Native American groups and tribes. So, and a lot of times we feel like it's too late if a group has gone out and staked 10 or 15 well sites and they're ready to move forward. If they bring in Native American consultants at that point, they may have to abandon a huge portion of that lease if there are concerns. So what we've been working with our partners is getting back into our middle range here to try and get groups involved at the leasing stage. So what typically happens is BLM will announce 6 months out that there's going to be a lease sale. So if we're in July, they're going to say there's going to be a December lease sale, and they'll release, the GIS map coordinate, maps and an environmental statement on here where, this area is going to be leased. We would like to see the tribes have the opportunity at that point to look at their own maps, talk amongst themselves about, areas they're concerned with, and we'd like to see a way to fund groups to go out on the landscape. And we're not talking about 100% inventory and right. for all these parcels, but just to get people on the ground to say, how does this fit in with what we know about where our ancestors did different things on the ground. We do this archaeologically at that ground level. So archaeologists go out with crews who are staking well pads and they look for things on the ground. But what we've really learned now is that archaeologists don't see a lot of the things that tribal members, Pueblo folks, Navajo folks, Ute folks, people across the West recognize as sacred sites, because we aren't trained as archaeologists to see what we're supposed to be seeing on that front. And that's why it's really critical at this point, I feel, and many of us feel, to have Native American folks involved in this work and not consult with them sort of after the fact and say, well, we've sold these leases and this is going to get developed in some way. Are there any concerns you have? We want to front load that and get the tribes involved. So this is something that we're working with our partners and with the Pueblo Governor's Council and with the Pueblo of Acoma specifically to see if we can get something in place where a lease sale gets announced. Acoma can make contact, for example, with BLM and say, hey, we have concerns about parcels 5, 6, 7, and 8. Can we talk about it? And we really want the agencies then to be amenable and responsive to tribes saying, we have these concerns. Can we talk about this? So what we're fighting here, though, is 40 years of federal bureaucracy, which, has done the job adequately, from certain standpoints. From the tribal standpoint, it's not doing the job adequately. Right. So that's why we feel like we need some change here.
All right. We will.
So change isn't fun for any of us. We get that.
Right.
But I think we're on the threshold of perhaps making some positive changes, and I think we'll actually help the agencies have more tools in their bag of tools in their shop to address different concerns and sort of not be in a position where they announce a lease sale and they get 10,000 protest comments. So, I ultimately think we're going to end up in a better place here, but we're in sort of the messy sausage-making part, if we want to talk about it that way.
Right. Well, that makes sense. My guest this morning, Paul Reed, is with me from Archaeology Southwest and Salmon Ruins. And Paul, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, though, I do want to ask you more about this integrated resource or integrated plan. I thought that we were talking about quite positively up until the last few weeks or so. We thought that things were going to go maybe to get that happening, and maybe what has changed and some other issues that are going on as well. Back with more with my guest in just a moment right here on KSJE, everyone. The time right now is coming up on 8:32.
Behind every great cloud is a whole bunch of expensive computers. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace Tech, Demystifying the Digital Economy. I'm Molly Wood.
Marketplace Tech is supported by LifeRay, makers of a flexible open source software platform for building portals, intranets, websites, and